Hello and welcome to the Everything is Black and White podcast. It is the Monday show, finally back on a Monday with myself, Andrew Musgrove, and our Newcastle United editor, Aaron Stokes. Now we're going to reflect on Newcastle's 2-2 draw with Leeds United. But to begin with, I'm going to bring you guys a message of positivity because for some, especially on social media, it appears that the wheels have come off for Newcastle United in the race for the top four. But it hasn't. I'm not playing down the feeling of those who are nervous. I get it. For Newcastle are so close to achieving something that looked so unlikely. But the message is simple. It is in their hands. It is in Newcastle United's hands. Forget about Liverpool and Manchester United for Newcastle. We can't control nor impact what they do. Forget about Brighton too. They may have thrashed Arsenal, but as the great Joe Harvey would often say, let us not worry about them and let them worry about us. About Bruno's magic, Trippier's leadership, and Wilson's goals. And for sure, Eddie Howe and his players and his staff stumble across this unrehearsed and poorly written and put together monologue. The message is simple once again. It is in your hands, top four qualification. The context needs to be applied as well. This time last season, we were celebrating Newcastle retaining their Premier League status. Fears of a cold, wet and windy Wednesday night in Stoke still very much etched on our brains. 12 months on, we're panicking about missing out on Champions League football nights on the continent. For however this season ends, Eddie Howe and his players and his coaching staff deserve a huge amount of praise for turning this football club into a competitive one. And whether they finish third, fourth, fifth or sixth, it's been a great season. But here on Everything is Black and White podcast, we're not even going to consider anything but a top four finish because, again, it's in Newcastle's hands. And it starts with Thursday at St James's Park, the fortress. It is our house. And with the roar of all four corners, this ever-loyal fan base has the chance to set the tone and to rattle the visitors. There are few greater arenas to play in when St James's Park is rocking, and few teams can handle that noise that echoes around. We know if Newcastle play as they have done for the majority of this season, then trips to the San Siro or the Camp Nou can become a reality. So on Thursday, don't hide behind your hands. Don't let the nerves get the better of you. Help the lads to get over the line, cheer every kick, every tackle, every corner, and every goal. Newcastle's Champions League destiny is in their own hands. So let's get it done. Are you feeling inspired?
Goosebumps there. Whew, chills. Get that blasted out at the St James's Park speakers on Thursday and they'll be all right, eh?
Yes, look, they're going to do it. We're at home against Brighton, then against Leicester, St James's Park rocking. I know there is a bit of doom and gloom, but look, Newcastle, it's their own destiny. They control it. They can have Champions League football wrapped up before the final day of the season.
Yeah, look, I'm not going to lie to you. I'm nervous. I'm feeling nervous. I think if Arsenal had torn Brighton a new one yesterday, I would have been a bit more calm. But yeah, it's getting to the nitty gritty. It's squeaky bum time, as you text me on Saturday afternoon. But as you say, 2 games at St James's Park, huge test. But a massive advantage for Newcastle United.
The mighty win says, still in our own hands, no time to panic. And that's the message I wanted to get across. There isn't any time. It's not a time to panic. Newcastle are third in the league out of merit. The goal difference is brilliant. And look, yeah, we all wanted a win against Leeds United, but, the alternative is better to get a point than it is to lose the game. And yes, we're going to discuss the game and the analysis. It isn't overwhelmingly, party-like. I don't want to say negative because I've just done a big monologue of positivity, but we are going to have to be critical in some elements of the performance. But again, the important point was not to lose. And when it comes down to it, that point against Leeds United at Ellen Road, it could be a huge, huge point in the race for Champions League football.
It could be a massive point, and I think we'll obviously know a lot more tonight, Monday night, obviously depending on when this podcast goes out. Liverpool, hopefully Leicester can get the job done. But as you say, it's still in their hands. There's still that comfortable buffer. And look, Liverpool have got to go a long way to leapfrog on the Manchester United or stuttering as well. Still in Newcastle's hands, as you say.
Graham says, "Howie, man, what are you doing a Monday show on a Monday for? What's going on? It's meant to be a Tuesday." To coin a phrase, says, "It sounds like someone is panicking to me." I hope that it wasn't me. I'm trying to get everyone inspired and motivated. I'm not panicking. Look, top 4 football, we're going to have it sewn up. I am confident. I do think, though, obviously, as you mentioned there, Brighton beating Arsenal, that will set a lot of people's nerves, really, really going. But then you look at what happened against Everton. No one expected Brighton to fold in that way, and they haven't done that many times. The Premier League this season has just produced some weird and wonderful results. And while you do look at that Arsenal game, you say Brighton played really well. I don't think that necessarily means they're going to play that well against Newcastle. Anything can happen. I just think with the fan base absolutely rocking the display that's going to go on with War Flags, I just think it is the perfect night for Newcastle to take that, what will be hopefully the penultimate step to qualifying for the Champions League.
Yeah, I've said it before this season, but there's just been something special about Nights Under the Lights this season. A Thursday night game, the atmosphere is going to be very, very intense. Newcastle have already played Brighton this season. I mean, got to cast your mind back a long way to the very start of the season, but they'd more than matched them, took a point away from the Amex. And you've just got to hope that it's one of those nights that we've seen like Arsenal last season and Manchester United last month, and the crowd sort of carry them through it.
As Graham says here, I think the Brighton result could just focus our lads' minds, and also St James's Park not take it easy and to go full throttle. Simon Natwa says it looks like Aaron might be nervous.
I'm a little bit nervous. I'm not going to lie, and I feel enthused by your speech, and I completely agree with the sentiment. But I just think, Newcastle coming just are they just sort of really wanting that finish line? Are they crawling over it? It looks like there's a lot of tired bodies out there. Brighton with these games in hand, with a big show-stopping performance like that yesterday. I'm a little bit nervous, but I'm just trying to keep the feet on the ground.
Graham says Aaron is always nervous. Yeah,
he's not wrong. To be fair, I always am.
You are. You did text us, didn't you? You said you were feeling nervous about Thursday, but I just feel you are spot on. They are looking tired. I think against Leeds, we saw they were really running on empty. But again, they know what's at stake here, and I just feel we say it a lot, and we're very cliche with it. But it is that 12th man element on Thursday, and the fans have a massive part to play on what happens on Thursday. And you just have to hope that the players can match the energy and the atmosphere that the fans will bring on Thursday, and also that Eddie Howe has had enough time to work on what went wrong against Leeds and to turn that around ahead of the visit of Brighton. Because let's be quite frank, it wasn't the best performance at all from Newcastle United against Leeds United. On paper, that's a game you should be winning. If you're a top four, you're serious top four contenders, you want all 3 points there. You should be winning that game. Newcastle United, especially when you go ahead with such little time remaining on the clock, you need to be seeing that game out. But just their overall performance, there was something lacking about it. And I think it probably does go back to their energy levels, and are they just running on empty?
It was a surprise for me, because we've seen so often this season, and especially in the last month or two, Newcastle, when they struggle to get into the game, but then they find that goal that takes them ahead in the second half. We saw it at Brentford, they kicked on. We saw it against Southampton, where they really struggled, went behind. As soon as they get that second or third goal and they're ahead, we see them kick on. And when Wilson scored that second penalty on Saturday, I thought, right, they're going to kick on. We're going to get a third. We're going to get a fourth. But I don't know. They just didn't look the same. They created very little from open play in both halves, I thought. And I think there's just, as you say, a lot of tired bodies out there. I think, we talked about it off air this morning. The defense for the first goal was very, very poor. Some of the players that have been absolutely, mainstays in this team all season are starting to look a little bit leggy. Bruno, maybe Trippier. It's been a long season for some of these players, not helped at all by the World Cup, not helped by the pressure that has been put on them having to try and stay in the top 4. And I just hope that they can just find a little bit more and just dig a little bit deeper for the final 3 games, which I'm sure they will, by the way, knowing Eddie Howe's teams.
Fingers crossed. Darren says we need to stop leaking goals. That was the one thing when the opposition is attacking, you feel like we are going to leak goals, which we weren't doing in the first half of the season. And again, to concede so early on, I mean, early goals are going to be key in the remainder of these games, because if there's an early goal on Thursday against Newcastle, and it's actually against Newcastle, then the nerves, I think, will start to settle in. And we talk about St James's Park being this fantastic fortress. But when nerves start settling in, it can change your game. And again, it's understandable to be nervous. So I think Thursday, key Newcastle get an early goal. But as Darren says there, to stop leaking goals just in general, because again, against Leeds, to concede so early on, it wasn't the best goal in the world. There's questions over whether the defense should have done better. Nick Pope should have done better. I think Eddie Howe will be disappointed in the fashion that they did concede first at Leeds.
I'd agree with that. I think it was really, really interesting because I think a lot of fans would have went into that game thinking it's a big Sam team fighting at the bottom. They're going to sit and defend, and actually they didn't. And within the first 10 or 15 seconds, Leeds had actually given away a free kick because they were pressing so intensely on Newcastle's back line. And that's what we saw the first half. Were Newcastle ready for it? Maybe not. We've watched the replays of the first goal this morning, and there's a lot of standing around. Nobody really knows whose man is who. We've obviously disagreed off air about whether Pope's to blame. I personally think he does well to stop the goal. But then you've got to look at Alexander Isak, stood dead in his tracks. Luke Ayling wants that rebound more. And as you know,
well, just before we get onto the screenshot that I put on the screen of when Patrick Bamford has put the ball into the box, I think blame is the wrong word to use. I'm not going to blame Nick Pope for that first goal. Should he have done better in the way he directs the ball? I would argue potentially. Now, you said to me, it's come at him at pace. What is he meant to do in that situation? However, I think if you're Nick Pope and you're looking back over that today, you'll be slightly disappointed that you've pushed it straight back into the area because, look, I was never a professional goalkeeper, but I did play in goal when I was younger. And the first thing you kind of taught is when the ball comes in, if you can't catch it, you do not push it back into the area.
In an ideal world, obviously, he tips that around the post. But I think when you look at that and look at that screenshot, that's on the screen right now, 3 defenders, all goal side before that cross comes in. Alexander Isak pretty much level with Luke Ayling when that cross comes in. Pope, as I say, it's coming at him quick. It's a split-second reaction. He does very well to stop it. One of those defenders has got to be mopping up. Alexander Isak, fantastic going forward. Not going to rate his chances as a left-back. I'm not sure Pope's to blame for that. Yes, he'll probably look at that and think I should have done better, but that goal was so avoidable, and Pope, was sort of left a bit helpless by his defence, I think.
Again, Nick, if you watch it, I'm not blaming you for it. I'm just saying you could have tipped it around the post, maybe. The point being is that if the defence do their job here, Nick Pope's got an easier save to make because we did this a few weeks back. I can't quite remember what game it was. There was an element on there was a shot on the edge. Anyway, and I got a little bit angry at the defence because again, I've just got schoolboy defending written down on my pad here because it is schoolboy defending. I mean, first of all, there's no way Patrick Bamford should be allowed to get down that left-hand side. Trippier just doesn't follow him. And then the ball's into the box. And if you look here at the players, Newcastle United players in the box, there is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Now, you could arguably say that 6 of them out of the 7 are not marking a man at all. And there's not a man really close to any of the 4. Well, there's 4 Leeds players in the box. Dan Burn is trying to track Rodrigo. The other 3 that are just sitting there. They could set up camp there.
I think if you hadn't watched the game and you were looking at that, you'd probably think that it's in the closing stages. You wouldn't have said that was first 10, 15 minutes of a game where Newcastle had actually more than match Leeds. Yeah, it was a poor one to concede, definitely.
And you mentioned that he's letting his man go. Disappointing, but I think the defence as a whole have got to do. I mean, the 2 centre-backs, so they're marking there. Joelinton, again, he's kind of in no man's land. You've got Willock coming in. It's a little bit of a mess, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think it sort of set the tone for the game. And I think looking back at that as a whole, Howe will be very disappointed at that, more so than Nick Pope will be disappointed by his save.
I'm not blaming Nick Pope. Nick, don't write in. And then, let's talk about Isak because another big discussion over the weekend has been about this experiment with Isak and Wilson. And is it working? Is it the right time to do it? Look, Eddie Howe, I'm not going to say he's bowed to pressure because a lot of people wanted. He hasn't made this decision because everyone was saying play Isak and Wilson together. But it's happened. It's not worked. I don't think he should have done it on Saturday against Leeds because it just didn't work against Arsenal. I don't think he should do it against Brighton either. If it was me, Isak, I would play up top. And then you look at bringing potentially Anthony Gordon or Alan St-Maximin on the left-hand side. What are your thoughts?
I mean, anybody who's a regular viewer or listener knows that I was always against it from the outset. I would personally make a change for Brighton. I think you need to get an out-and-out winger back on the flank, someone like Maxi, maybe even Gordon. But as to who starts up front, I'm going to be completely honest. I'm going to sit on the fence and say that I don't actually mind who starts up front. I think to drop Callum Wilson in the goal-scoring form that he's in would be very, very harsh. But also, I think it might be a game that suits Alexander Isak. And although he didn't score on Saturday, the 2 penalties that Newcastle United got were from his positioning, his running, and his confidence. So I think Howe's got a luxury of starting either of them, and I don't think the team gets weakened on Thursday.
The mighty win says Pope had to pull the ball from behind him. Amazing save. Definitely not his fault.
Yeah.
On the Isak Wilson kind of question, if you're watching live, let us know in the comments what you would do. I just feel like Thursday suits Lewis Dunk if it's Callum Wilson, that physical battle. Whereas when Isak's played up front, he's still drifting from the wide. I think if Lewis Dunk and whoever it might be, they played the young lad on loan from Chelsea, didn't they, against Arsenal, whether Webster will be back, I don't know. But I just feel like if you've got Isak running at you and you're Lewis Dunk and you're constantly having to pedal backwards, check over each shoulder, I think you're going to have more success if you're Newcastle United than you are, a muscle for muscle kind of battle.
Yeah, I'm not disagreeing with that at all. And I think actually when you look at the limited chances Newcastle United made on Saturday afternoon, a lot of them came through Isak. Obviously, that first penalty was from him, daring to run. I mean, it was an absolutely shambolic tackle from the Leeds defender. The second one is him trying to win that header. And even, on another day, Newcastle would have won it when he was played through at the end by Anthony Gordon, just sort of mistimed his run a bit at the end. As you say, on the other hand, Callum Wilson, in the form he's in, he's enjoying one of his best goal-scoring forms in front of goal since he's joined the team. It's a good luxury to have for Howe, but I do agree with you that Isak would probably pose that type of Brighton defence more of a problem.
Roger says, I agree with you, Andrew. Isak's wasted on the left wing twice. Lorraine says, Pope has to learn to gather and hold on to the ball. What with goalies now, keep hitting the ball away. Case in point on Saturday. Darren says, maybe go with Alan St-Maximin Wilson or Isak and Murphy against Brighton to start. Drop Miggy to the bench with Wilson or Isak. Yeah, you're right, Aaron. It is a positive dilemma to have. You just maybe wishing you're not having to make such a big decision in such a big game. Let's get back onto the Leeds game then. Newcastle conceded a penalty again. The defence very easy for Leeds, and we talk about the side that opposition teams tend to target, and we all often say, look, it's Dan Burn. Dan Burn is the one that teams think is the weak link. But against Leeds, it looked like they were targeting that right-hand side. And Trippier, he's been brilliant. He will be on the nomination list, you would think, for many for player of the season. But he had a torrid time, I thought, on Saturday against Leeds. And they seemed to me, anyway, to be targeting that side of Newcastle, and that's where the penalty came down that side. Of course, it was Joe Linton, but again, so easy. They drifted past into the box, and you can't do that against Brighton. With the players they've got, there's going to have to be more energy. They're going to have to be closer to them. They're just going to have to be a bit stronger and a bit more clinical with the ball at their feet to make sure Brighton don't get into the box in the same fashion. But yeah, what did you make of that penalty that obviously, thankfully, was missed in the end?
A poor one to give away. Credit to Joe Linton for tracking back, but I thought it was a sloppy foul in the box, one he shouldn't have been trying to make. I agree with your assessment that that part of the pitch looked very sort of exposed on Saturday in between Share and Trips. And I'll be completely honest, I was fearing the worst at that point when Simon Hooper pointed to the spot. I was thinking, 2-0 down at Ellen Road with them playing like this, it would have been a very, very long road back. Thankfully, Nick Pope was on hand to make another incredible save.
It was a great save, and then to get the
great save to get the rebound,
the ball away, and Patrick Bamford, when you looks down, I guess you look really is down. And then Newcastle go up the other end, and they get back in the game. A penalty themselves. And it comes at the right time, you think, and like you said earlier, you would think from then they kick on. But yeah, what did you make of the penalty? I mean, no question, it's a penalty. It's a very clumsy from Max Rover.
Yeah, stonewall penalty. Very clever play from Isak to just knock it away from him at the last minute. Again, we saw those little mind games with Kieran Trippier picking up the ball. I think they're going to have to start, finding a new tactic, because I think as soon as Trippier picked up the ball, I was like, he's not taking that penalty. Very interesting though here after the game, and it was something I hadn't really thought about myself, but obviously Callum Wilson took both penalties on Saturday. Alexander Isak has scored both of his for Newcastle. And Eddie Howe was obviously asked post-match who his penalty taker was, and he sort of said he doesn't really mind, which I think is again another very big positive to have. Callum Wilson though, he just looks like he's never going to miss at the minute. I thought first penalty fantastic, second one, the pressure's always on you when you've got to take a second one against the same goalkeeper. Yeah, although Newcastle didn't make too much from open play, I thought their penalties were absolutely fantastic.
David says, I think Burns should go to centre back and you drop Shearer Botman for a bit. We are so leaky. Or throw at the back with Target and Trippier out wing backs. What do you make of that?
In theory, potentially. I think at this stage of the season, it's a huge gamble to start changing formations and personnel in a back four that's still got the best defensive record in the league. I get that everyone's points, and I completely agree with the sentiment that they're starting to leak goals, starting to look a bit shaky, but to suddenly move Dan Burn back into centre back where he hasn't played since early this season, I'm not too sure it's the best move to do. Maybe pre-season, maybe next season.
Yeah, he's not going to make wholesale changes. That's going to change the formation, I don't think. Barry says Trippier was awful on Saturday, and I think it probably goes to emphasise the fact that Newcastle haven't got a replacement for him. Obviously, Kraft's out, and he did a fantastic job when he needed to fill in the last time around, but there isn't really a replacement that you could bring in. And if Trippier does need a rest, obviously you would think with 3 games to go, he's not going to get that rest. But it emphasises again where they need to maybe buy in the summer.
Yeah, it's a shame we haven't seen more of Harrison Ashby. Obviously, he came in January as sort of the backup. Obviously struggled with injury after joining from West Ham. I think pre-season's big for him. Hopefully next season we can see a little bit more rotation, a little bit more of Ashby in the first team, because he's very, very, clearly a highly rated talent.
Let's get on to then. I mean, actually, what the other big discussion is all about Bruno and whether he's fit. He's clearly not fully fit, is he? You can see he just doesn't look himself. He looks like at times he's limping out there, and I think if the end of the season wasn't so close, or if Newcastle were maybe in the position that we were last season where there was nothing to really play for, we wouldn't be seeing Bruno Guimaraes in the side at the moment, because quite clearly he's not at his best. And it was really interesting, actually, because his pass led to the penalty. And the commentator on Match of the Day actually said, in that moment of play, another overhit pass from Bruno. And that kind of summed up his day on Saturday. There was a couple of moments of magic when the ball was put over to Anthony Gordon. Anthony Gordon, gets brought down, and he's clearly still able to pull off them passes, but not as consistently. He's not performing as consistent as we're used to. And I've actually seen suggestions to whether, and we've spoken about it today off air, do you use him as an impact sub in the remainder of the games, or are you saying to him and to our listeners, and Eddie Howe is going to be saying to the fans, look, a 70% fit Bruno is better starting the game and trying to get him through 90 minutes than bringing him off the bench with half an hour to go?
That would be my school of thought. I think even if you've got it's really interesting with Bruno because we're sort of in uncharted territory. He's came, 15, 16 months ago, and he hasn't really put a bad spell of form together until maybe recently. The last 3 games, I think, have been noticeably below par. But to those people saying, oh, well, let's give him a rest, between now and the end of the season, who on earth do you bring in? And that is the genuine question. You've got no Sean Longstaff at the minute. I'm not having for a minute that I'd prefer to have Elliot Anderson in the middle of a Bruno, even a 70% fit Bruno in this team is a better call for me. So it's sort of not a pointless discussion, but I'm sort of not one that I really want to buy into, because I just think, who do you bring in for him? There isn't really an option there, especially with Richie now out until the end of the season. you've got to stick with him and just hope that, like the others, he can just sort of crawl over the line for the next 3
Find
games.
that.
He's clearly not fit, though. I mean, yes, there were some fantastic moments from him on Saturday afternoon, but he looks a far cry from the player we saw at the start of the season.
The mighty win says Bruno on one leg is better than any other option. Darren says start with Bruno. The counter phrase says start him and take him off for the final third. Roger says when Bruno was suspended, our form dived. He's amazing. And Barry says that's madness. Bruno has to play one leg or none. No one's doubting his ability. It's just very noticeable that he's just not able to play the way he has done it. He needs to get that rest and recuperation through the summer. On the discussion of midfielders, a lot has been said, especially again in reaction to the draw with Leeds, to whether Newcastle made a mistake in January not bringing in a centre midfielder. They spent 40 million Anthony Gordon. That was the big signing. They were linked to several centre midfielders, and again, we know this summer that's where they're going to be aiming for, most likely a defensive centre midfielder. Did they make a mistake in January not bringing in one to cover Shelvey's absence, his exit? And I'm not saying Shelvey was the answer, because by goodness, we know he was not the answer. And I was happy to see him leave. I would have been happier had someone come in. So did they make a mistake?
Yeah, I'd say so. And I think if you gave Eddie Howe the option to rewind time, he would definitely be going back and either not letting Shelvey go or making sure there was a quick, even a temporary replacement brought in. The first press conference after the January window, Eddie Howe was asked, "Are you light?" And he basically just came out and gave us a straight answer and said, "Yeah, we're very light in that position." That hasn't been helped by Longstaff obviously being injured, Matt Ritchie out at the end of the season, Bruno having that little dip in form, where still, his ankle is clearly still not right. I think that everyone knows they're light in that department, and they should have went out in January and even, as I say, just got a loan in or something.
Well, I looked at the centre midfielders who were signed by Premier League clubs in January. One was Andres Santos, who Newcastle was strongly linked with, but he was loaned back to the club he moved from in Brazil. He's joined Chelsea. Then you had Naoura Hamada, who joined Crystal Palace, 21-year-old, joined for 10 million from Stuttgart. He's featured 7 times for Palace, but hasn't featured since March 19th, and he was on the bench for the first time the weekend just gone, but 8 games not in the squad. I think that probably coincides with the managerial switch there. So that was one of the options there. Weston McKennie came in on loan from Juventus to Leeds United, which many people, I think, they would have taken him here in Newcastle United, but obviously he had that American link with Jesse Marsh and Tyler Adams as well. So that one probably sorted quite easily there. Mario Lemina was the other one who was strongly linked as well. He joined Wolves from Nice. When you look at the players who did move to the Premier League, I mean, one's for the future. You could see Mario Lemina, a stopgap potentially. Weston McKennie has massive fans all over the globe. Is the reason he played for Juventus. But I mean, did any of them names? Are you looking at them and thinking, what if? Could any of them names done a job? In the situation Newcastle find themselves in now?
Maybe. I think McKennie was the one in January where everyone sort of sat up and thought, that's quite a coup for Leeds to get him from Juventus. I think you asked Leeds fans now, it hasn't worked out. They're still not too sure whether he sort of plays well in a 10 or as a centre midfielder. Ultimately, I think they were caught a bit on the hop with Shelvey. Eddie Howe didn't expect to lose him in January. They lost him with not too many days left in the window to find a replacement. They probably didn't want to go out and spend a lot of money on a player that wasn't initially on their list or wasn't initially a target. As I say, they've been very unlucky with injuries. Obviously, Joel
should they have gone and moved things? Obviously, we're talking about them on the verge of qualifying for the top 4, which accelerates their project plan by 3, 4, 5 years potentially. So they're going to have to change the plan for the summer, compared to what they probably would have had in mind at the start of this season. So why not change your plan in January and go, okay, look, Shelvey has gone. I know there wasn't that much time to sort a replacement, but why not bring a signing forward? Because You get the, you know,
Yeah,
why
I
not?
get the point, and I certainly think they did try and bring bodies in. You know, that there was that sort of late search to try and sort of find both replacements for Wood and John Joe Shelby. I know they obviously bought Anthony Gordon in. That was another attacking outlet for them. Did they run out of time? Did they not want to pay? You know, January notoriously is a very hard window, made even more hard. You know, when you're caught on the hop as they were with Shelby.
Do you think there'll be a learning curve from it,
Yeah,
regardless of where
yeah,
Newcastle finish?
absolutely. I think there'll have been a learning curve from pretty much every window this new ownership's had. I think January 2022 taught them that sometimes you just need to spend to get out of trouble or to get you over the line. Summer probably taught them that you can go back in for targets that you've previously missed out on. Sven Botman, and I think Hugo Ekitike, missing out on him was a big learning curve for them, and one that's actually turned out quite well. And January, I'm sure, is. I think there's two sides to look at January. Newcastle did very well to get the finances they did for Chris Wood. And John Joe Shelby wanted to go. Eddie Howe didn't want to stand on his way. Fair play. But I think they'll look at that and think if they could have their time over again, they would have maybe done things differently.
Yeah, next time you get the replacement around. And then you let your player go, perhaps. Les says, I think Shelby moved caught everyone by surprise, to be fair.
Yeah.
Too late in the window to react, too good of a deal to ignore, which is what you've just said there, Aaron. We've got loads of comments coming in, which is brilliant. Roger says, who could we hypothetically have gotten for midfield on loan? I think we've kind of gone through the realistic options. I mean, if we look more permanently, they were linked to the likes of David Luiz, James Ward-Prowse. But again, as you say there, if it's one thing moving your transfer plans forward, it's another thing also having to readjust the budget.
And also, it's something that I've mentioned a few times on this podcast. They spent 48 million roughly in January on Ashby and Gordon. In today's market, by no means a lot of money. And I think they did that and kept their powder relatively dry, knowing that they've got a huge game-changing transformational summer coming up, where they maybe want to keep enough in the bank to make sure they've got it. And I know what you're saying, should they have just brought it forward, but they were third in the league at the time. Eddie Howe and Dan Ashworth maybe thought we've got enough to get us over. They probably didn't expect, there's probably been, only a brief period since January where every single midfielder has been fit. Obviously, Bruno rolled his ankle. In Feb, Joe Linton's had a spell out. Willock did his hamstring. Longstaff's got his foot injury. They've been quite unlucky with the injuries, so I'm not too sure.
I guess, though, playing devil's advocate, if Newcastle miss out on top four football, which they won't, but if they did, would people then come back and say, you gambled, it hasn't paid off, this is the best chance to really get into that top four, because next season you're going to have 3 or 4 teams who've totally failed this season come back at a force, and Newcastle will be a force. But what you can do in the summer if you're in the Champions League compared to what you can do in the Europa League is it's a sizable difference.
I don't think you can. I don't think if they miss out on the top four, which they won't, as you just said, I fully agree with you. I don't think you'd look back and think, oh, well, they lost it in January, because I don't think they did. I think they've just lost it by a little bit of bad luck and just sort of maybe run out of steam. But I don't think. Look, it's impossible to say. If they got a new midfielder in January, everything could have been different. It's all very hypothetical. I'm sorry.
Mirage says we should have recruited a midfielder back in January, at least one loanee. Mighty Win says I'm a bit of a Shelby fan, but I do really think he could have made a difference to our current dip of form. Does he really think he could have made a difference? Not really. I agree with you on that. Roger says I agree, Aaron. Yet on the flip side, we now have an extra number to get rid of, i.e. Shelby. Darren says when key players are out, you hope someone would step up and deliver, like Anderson or Gordon, pushing for the first team and to add goals to the side. And there is a lot of calls here for Anderson asking why can't he get a game. Several of you are asking that question. I guess, yeah, Aaron, that's the question. Why can't Elliot Anderson do a job in the middle of the park?
I've been scratching my head about this one ever since that away game at Forest. I thought that would be the game where he kicks on. He's finally sort of arrived in the Premier League. A very good performance off the bench when they needed him. Obviously, that goal that was ruled out. And ever since then, we've seen him for what, 10, 15 minutes off the bench and just sort of wanting a bit more. I can't understand why Howe hasn't given him more time. On Darren Lee's comment, I completely agree. I think it's unfair to say that he hasn't stepped up. He can only do what he can with the minutes he's given. I think Gordon is another one who, the move hasn't really worked out so far when they probably needed it to, sharpish. But there's obviously a lot of outside factors around that in terms of how he left Everton, his injuries, and the minutes he's been given. So, yeah, it's a tricky one.
Now, we often have big calls on this podcast from our regular viewers, and we love it. Every week we love it. And here is one that is probably the call of the week. To coin a phrase, says, don't we have any academy defensive midfielders? Failing that, try Trippier there and play Ashby. Now, if you'd asked me to consider what options to how to fill that gap, how to help out Bruno in the middle of the park, not in a month of Sundays would I have come up with that one.
Liverpool have tried it with Trent, and that's worked out well. It wouldn't be the worst idea in the world. I'd seen a lot of people also, well, not a lot of people, that's probably an exaggeration, but a few people saying Shelby's played there before. Sorry, not Shelby. Fabian Schär's played there before. Probably not for me. I think, him and Botman have obviously struck up a very good partnership. There's options there, but I think it goes back to what we said earlier in the show. Eddie Howe, 3 games left, 3 huge games left, is not going to tinker and try anything like that he hasn't tried before. I think, as the comments have been saying, he'd rather play a one-legged Bruno in that position than try and risk Kieran Trippier in there. But it's a very good shout and one to maybe consider next season.
And I guess with Kieran Trippier looking a little bit tired as well, it's probably not the best position to try him in either. Ashley says, this is like a post-mortem. Remember, Champions League qualification is still in our hands with 2 wins out of 3, and that's assuming Liverpool win all the games. Ashley, were you watching the start of the show? I did a positive monologue. It was full of positivity. We're not even considering Newcastle missing out on the top 4. Once we're finished, you have to go back and watch it and have it on repeat, because you can see that me and Aaron, well, at least me, I'm positive it's going to happen. Starting with Thursday and the roar of the Gallagher. Let's get back to the rest of the Leeds game then. The handball, ball into the box, Isak again involved, and Firpo, he catches it. He certainly punches it. No, not. I don't even understand why he had to go to the VAR.
Justice was served in the end, by the way, on him getting a red card. But I cannot, and I tweeted this out at the time, I cannot understand for the life of me how he has handled the ball like an NBA player above his head, and the referee hasn't given him a yellow card, even though 5 minutes earlier, VAR had to check whether it was a yellow or red card for that tackle. I mean, if he had obviously got sent off in the end, that Gordon tackle, but I just can't understand it.
No, it's very bizarre. I think the decision on the tackle against Bruno was the right decision. He's very fortunate. It's fine margins, because that boot is just a couple of inches kind of upwards. It's a red card, and it's potentially a season-ending tackle on Bruno Guimaraes. He's very fortunate. Very fortunate Bruno didn't react in the way that I think many assumed he would have done. And then the handball. He's just, Leeds fans, I think, have often criticised Firpo, and you mentioned it on the show that Isak's not got a chance at left back. Well, you ask Leeds fans, they'll probably take Isak at left back, because Firpo just doesn't seem capable of performing well at left back. But and then you have Callum Wilson taking the spot kick. Rob Les in goal, Leeds United goalkeeper, pointing where he wants it. The antics, he gets booked, and just a bit of gamemanship, and Callum Wilson sticks it in the back of the net. 17 goals this season.
Yeah, game management if it's a Leeds defender or Leeds goalkeeper doing that. Time wasting if it's a Newcastle defender or goalkeeper doing that, I think, is the rules this season. But yeah, that Callum Wilson penalty, the second one, that takes some bottle to just side foot it down the middle of the goal after already taking one. And that was, probably my favourite moment of the game. I thought it was a fantastic penalty. But yeah, Leeds maybe just practicing a little bit of the dark arts for that penalty. Have they learned from Newcastle?
I was going to say,
taking a page out of their book.
Yeah, they've been watching now. We've got a few comments here from Simon, and I'll just read them out. He's not overly pleased, I don't think, with Newcastle United's performance. He says, "Stop everyone making pathetic excuses. There's one and only one reason why why they dropped points against Leeds. They wanted it more than we did. End of story." And he's also said, tiredness isn't an excuse for Newcastle United. So he's one Newcastle United fan. I'm assuming he's a Newcastle United fan who isn't happy with what he saw on Saturday. I agree to a certain extent about Leeds wanting it more. They certainly seem to want it more in the first half, and obviously they rallied late in the second half. But I think there's a question to whether they wanted it more or whether Newcastle were just tired. Or are the two, do you have to talk about one and the other at the same time?
Did Leeds want it more? I think it was just a poor Newcastle performance, and I just think they didn't create enough in attack from open play. They didn't defend well enough for the opening goal. The second goal at the end, I think it's an unlucky one to concede. Poor probably gathers that if it doesn't ping off Trippier's head, we'll never know. But I just think it just wasn't the Newcastle that we've been used to seeing, and I think these things can happen. We've seen it in the recent games. We saw it at Arsenal. It was just a game where they just weren't themselves, I think.
Do you see nerves creeping in? I've asked this last week. I asked it at Gibbo, and he said there's not a shadow of doubt they'll be fine. I'm hoping the answer is no, and that what Eddie can do this week is just, like I say, go over what went wrong, and you can fix that. Because I think what's another positive to take from the performance against Leeds is that what went wrong in many ways is very fixable. It's not happening all the time. Like I said schoolboy defending, so it is the basics not getting done, but it's not every week. In our previous managers, the basics were not getting done every single week, and it seemed to be ingrained within them. Whereas I think what we're seeing here is once every 8 or 9 games, they're letting themselves down. But it's because they've set the bar so high that we've come to expect them doing the basics every single week.
Exactly.
So I think anyhow, we'll go into this week into the training ground and say, look, you've done it for 95% of the season. Get closer to your man. Don't stand off. Be better when you've got the ball at your feet. Bruno, release it quicker. You can do it. You've shown you can do it. So go out and do it on Thursday.
I think we do. And it's not just us, I think the fan base as a whole, I think we do sort of forget, which is natural, where this team has come from in such a short space of time. This Newcastle last season was having those games against Leeds every other week, as you say. In terms of your first question, are they nervous? I don't think that was a nervous performance Saturday. I think when you've got players like Trippier and Callum Wilson in that dressing room with Eddie Howe, barking instructions and being ultra driven, I don't think you can be nervous. I think Eddie Howe will be saying what we've been saying. It's in their hands. They just need to go out and perform as they performed for 90% of the season at St James's Park. I don't think that was a nervous performance, and I don't think they will be nervous. I think I'm maybe the only nervous one, but a nice early goal Thursday, kill the game, 3 points, hopefully a Leicester result tonight, and we'll be thinking, what was I ever worried about?
I think Leicester will beat Liverpool tonight. I think they will do. The equaliser then, because when you get yourself into a winning position, anyhow referenced it in his post-match presser, you need to be holding on to that lead. So why did it slip?
I don't know, maybe tiredness. I think Newcastle, as I said earlier in the show, when they went 2-0, I thought, right, kick on, get the third goal, kill it. Leeds aren't coming back from that. And they didn't, and they sort of gave Leeds and the crowd maybe a little bit of hope. And as I said, in terms of the goal, Newcastle actually did quite well to clear their lines first time around. And then obviously Christensen hits that hit, deflection, Pope's beaten. Yeah, I think Newcastle just failed to kill it when they had the chance in the second half.
Yeah, because looking back on that second goal, the equaliser, they didn't do too much wrong in terms of getting it clear. They had to put their bodies on the line. There wasn't really an instance where they could just whack it up the field, and it's just unfortunate that it's hit Trippier and gone past Pope. I've seen a bit of stick for the initial corner being conceded. I'm not really sure what Trippier could have done. He had to clear the lines. He concedes a corner. If that's clear, but you're not remembering that corner. So I think it's just a wee bit unfortunate, but nonetheless very frustrating that they didn't manage to hold on. At the end, they're playing against 10 men for a few minutes. Beautiful ball by Bruno. And this is probably when we're talking about Bruno and whether we rest him and whether, you bring him off with, 15 minutes left, what have you. It's an even harder discussion to have because even though he's not his best, some of the passes he was playing on Saturday were unbelievable. I mean, that ball to Anthony Gordon was absolutely superb. And,
it's fantastic.
you know, I've seen a lot about his stats, actually. I had his stats written down. He still made the most accurate passes in the whole entire game. Now, his accurate percentage rate was down. I think it was about 78%, and there was 4 or 5 Newcastle players a bit higher than them. But in terms of actual passes, he was the highest Newcastle United player. So he obviously he's still key to this team. And it just goes back to your original point to the question is, if you drop them, if you rest them, who on earth are you resting them for?
And we're so used to Bruno consistently dropping 9 out of 10 performances or 10 out of 10 performances that when he does have, a few games where he's dropping 5s or 6 or 7s, in our opinion, it's noticeable, But ultimately, as you say, that ball to Anthony Gordon at the very end of the game, and this is a player we've just been saying looks tired and isn't fully fit. 90th minute, he's playing that ball over the top of Gordon to draw Firpo in that red card. Yeah.
Do you think opposition teams have come to target Bruno and they have kind of worked out that if you get on top of him and if you get in on or rattle him, he doesn't like it. He's either going to react to it or he's going to maybe go into his shell a little bit. He needs time and space on the ball to work his magic.
I think teams have absolutely 100%. A lot of teams this season have went out there with the sole purpose of trying to stop him. I remember when Manchester United came to St James's Park last month, and Scott McTominay for the first 15 games just literally did not leave Bruno's side until he realised that he wasn't getting anywhere near him, and they changed it up. Arsenal last week really targeted him, didn't give him an inch, as we talked about last week. That midfield was swarming him, and I think we saw the same on Saturday at Leeds. I think clubs now know that if you let him play and you give him time and space, this Newcastle team can pick you apart. And I think this is why we maybe need another midfielder brought in the summer, just to try and take a little bit of that pressure off Bruno in the middle.
And Gary says Bruno's been getting caught in possession the last few weeks. Don't know if that's because he's carrying an ankle injury. And this is going to sound really weird, but what has been... Don't laugh. Wait until I finish the sentence. What's been sort of refreshing, again, I appreciate it's going to sound weird, is I totally agree with what Gary's just said there. We're talking about Bruno not being at his best, being below par. And I think Newcastle United of old, they were scared to criticise their best player, the fans. But what we're actually seeing, I think, is honestly with the fan base and going, well, actually, you know what? He's not being at his best. And yes, some are going, well, it's down to the injury, but some are saying, well, regardless of that, he's got to do better. And I don't know, there's just something refreshing about that. And I don't know, it rolls into where Newcastle United are going. They're not just relying on one player all the time. I don't know. I just think there is something refreshing about Newcastle fans being honest when it comes to the performance of arguably their best player in the squad.
And I think a lot of Newcastle United fans know that, as I touched on earlier, he's been here, 15, 16 months now, and he hasn't actually ever, went through a really barren run of, dropping absolute stinkers. And I don't think he is at the minute. He just isn't looking, as sharpest. He isn't looking as comfortable. He isn't keeping the ball as well as he used to. And that's absolutely fine because he's been due a spell like this. It's just unfortunate that it's coming at a really crucial period of games.
Christopher says, I think Bruno underperforming against Leeds. I think he needs a rest for one game. Christopher, who would you play in place of Bruno? Let us know. Brian says, totally agree. Bruno's been caught on the ball too much. A fit and active Anderson is less of a risk. There's lots of calls for Anderson to get the nod. If that was to happen, which we don't think it will, but if that was to happen, is it because Julian didn't have the best of games as the number 6? So can you play the Anderson as the number 6? I don't think that would work. So what do you do? How do you do that? Because Willock's not going to go anywhere.
I think it's simple. I think you play Joelinton deep, as we saw him start out against Leeds on Sunday.
But there's only one game recently where that's worked, and that was against Brentford when he was switched into that Longstaff was sacrificed. He was switched into it. It worked wonderfully. He then played the similar position, didn't he, against Villa, and it was torrid.
But you can't play Elliot Anderson there. He's too attacking. Joe Willock isn't going to sit. He doesn't suit sitting. Joelinton really is the only option. If you go with that midfield 3, I think you'd then put Anderson sort of central left. You'd have Willock maybe out on the right, but again, Willock doesn't really play down that flank these days. That's usually the Longstaff role. So I don't know. It's question marks for Howe if he does drop Bruno.
Christopher has come back and said he would play Anderson. We've got David saying, I worry about how tired the team looks without Europe and without a winter break. The way Howe likes to play requires a large squad, so additions needed in the summer. And that leads on to a bit of transfer news. This morning, Sky over in Germany, Austria, have linked Newcastle United with a player from
Leipzig.
called
Dominic Sobersley is, I think, how you pronounce it.
With that £70 million is the rumoured Gao Closey. I did see him linked a couple of weeks back as well. That is the kind of elite market Newcastle United are shopping in. However, considering David's comment there, you know, are you going to go out and spend 70 million on one player and take a significant chunk of your budget out when really you need maybe 8-9 additions?
Yeah, it's really interesting actually. When these Sobersley links came out this morning, there was a little bit of debate on that topic on Twitter, and Kev Lawson, a Newcastle United fan, was one of the people that tweeted that said, actually, I would want Newcastle to sign 3 first team additions in the summer rather than 5 or 6. I think a lot of people, if you'd ask them that question, they'll say, I want 6 or 7 to make sure we've got enough depth. It all depends on their budget. It all depends on what competition they're playing in next season, obviously, which is going to be the Champions League, touch wood. So, yeah, very interesting. But, you know, a player of his talent, Hungarian international, very, very highly rated, one of the Bundesliga's best players in recent years. He'd be absolutely fantastic.
John says, I'd rather not. And another surprising element of today's show, there's been so many comments asking about Isak Hayden. I can't work out whether people are being serious. We've got another one saying here, Hayden is coming back. A lot of people asking, do you think Isak Hayden has a future in this Newcastle United squad going into next season?
No. But I think, again, maybe if Eddie Howe had his time again, he might have thought about keeping him. But I don't personally think Isak Hayden has a future. We obviously know he's coming back because his clause wasn't met in his Norwich loan deal, which was a clause that would see him stay permanently if they got promoted, which they didn't. But no, I don't think he has, which is unfortunate because he's a very, very nice guy, but I don't think so.
Roger Cook says, what 3 positions, Aaron?
Oh, if you could give me 3 first team positions right now to improve this summer, I would get a first team holding midfielder at number 6. I would get a first choice left back. No disrespect to Dan Burn. I think you just need someone a little bit more comfortable on the ball, maybe a bit better going forward. And I think I would sign and I'm really sorry as the founder of the Mickey Almiron fan club, but I think I would sign a first choice right midfielder as well.
Okay, let me guess. I can guess at least one of those names. Yeah. I say Moussa Diaby's going to be that one.
Definitely.
Left back wise, I can't really think of a left back off the top of my head that I'd be looking at.
A lot of links to Kieran Tierney, and I get it.
The chap at Brentford, I like. Nico Henry.
Yeah.
Could he do a job? I mean, he's done a good enough job so far for Brentford. He could be a decent addition to give a bit of competition to Burn and Target. And then you said a defensive midfielder. Yeah.
Yeah, defensive midfielder. I don't really have a preference on that. There's no really sticking out. A lot of players being linked at the minute, which I think we're going to see more and more of.
Tyler Adams linked.
There's going to be a lot of links in the next couple of weeks. I can be sure of that.
John says the absence of Longstaff and Bruno at 80% makes Thursday very tough. I'm trying to work out if a draw would be okay, and I think it probably would. Brighton seem class at the moment. Do you agree? They do. They look excellent. But hey, Everton beat them. Look, I'm not getting overly concerned about what happened on Sunday against Arsenal. Arsenal were nervous. They knew the title was pretty much done and dusted. They had to win. You know, that plays into it. And look, if Everton could beat Brighton, then Newcastle can go out and beat Brighton. You just don't know what's going to happen.
Yep, exactly that. And I think we've seen so many teams come to St James's Park this season and fans haven't been confident and they've blown them all away. So there's reasons to be confident despite Brighton's surge at the table.
John says, would you take James Ward-Prowse now Southampton are relegated?
Would you take James Ward-Prowse?
Yeah, I would.
I'm very surprised by that. It's not as if
there's an Everything is Black and White podcast exclusive. Andrew Musgrove, big fan of James Ward-Prowse. We've got the mighty win, says Grimaldo, Diaby and Harry Kane.
Grimaldo has just joined Leverkusen this morning. So that one's ruled out, unfortunately.
Well, they're going to they might need to sell then to pay for that. And who could they sell?
We said, yeah,
Oh, look at that. It's like it's working. It's just like someone's plan is working. Roger says Diaby could fill both right wing and striker. And he says he agrees with you, defensive midfielder and left back, definitely. David says Brighton are a bit of a bogey team, so he seems a little bit worried about Thursday. John says the double-barreled name full-back at Southampton, Walker Peters might be. Yeah, that is him. Could be good. I don't know. I've not been overly impressed with him. I think you're looking for players who stand out in a relegation threatened side, or a now relegated side. James Ward-Prowse, I think, is one of those names. You have the chat up front who's done all right. Marcus, I wasn't overly impressed when I watched him the other week at St James's Park. I think there's probably better left backs out there. I think also if you're going to go out and sign a left back, you're going to go out and sign someone who's much better than Dan Burn. And I think Dan Burn is better than Walker Peters.
I'm going to slightly disagree on that. I think he had a really good start the season. Was actually surprised Tottenham let him go when they did Southampton. Can play right back, can play left back. Wouldn't be so against that.
There you go. Look at that. Keep dropping your suggestions into the comments, and I'll put them to Aaron. We will discuss the names. The more interesting ones, the better. Let's just quickly hear from Eddie Howe in his press conference after the Leeds game. This is what he had to say when he was asked about taking positives from the game and just remaining positive after the result against Leeds.
Yeah, I think we have to be very positive. I think we're disappointed not to win today. I think it was a great chance for us with the lead and not long left in the match. But we have to accept what happened. It's still in our hands. We have 3 huge games to come. I think, again, you have to revert back. You sometimes have to take yourself back to the start of the season and what we would have thought to have been in this position now. And everyone at the club would have taken that. So it's in our hands and we have to be very positive about what's ahead.
And just to be clear, Jason Tyndall didn't hold his own press conference. He is on the green screen behind me, though. Do you sense, you're in the press conferences more than I am when it comes to Eddie Howe. Is that Eddie Howe the normal Eddie Howe, or are you sensing a little bit of nervousness? Is that just Eddie Howe is normal?
Newcastle United could win the league. And I think we get the same Eddie Howe as we do every week. He's very, very consistent, Eddie Howe, win or lose. I don't think there'll be any panic. I think, as he always says, and we always criticise him for not getting too carried away, it's focus on the next game. I agree with what he says in that clip. You've got to go back to the start of the season. And if someone said you're going to be playing Europa League football and you're going to be in a cup final, you would have snapped the hand off. I get the disappointment around it.
Do you think Arsenal and Michael Arteta are sitting in the dressing room, sitting in his office today, following a similar train of thought there, though?
That's completely different. That is a completely different. Arsenal last season were already playing European football. Yes, nobody gave them a chance to win the league. This Newcastle United team nearly got relegated last year. And that when I was talking about them being,
do you want to
for the Champions
take my
League.
script? You can reread
No,
them
look,
all
I'm just trying to play devil's advocate, and I've got to just say that everybody wants to finish in the Champions League. I think they will. It would be a fantastic achievement, but you've got to just sort of remember the goalposts have been shifted so much.
No, it will be a tremendous season, regardless of where Newcastle United finish, but it will be in the top 4.
Yeah.
A lot of people talking about Kieran Tierney. Now, he did start for Arsenal yesterday, and he has obviously he's battling Zinchenko. A lot of people like him. A lot of people do like him. He brings a bit of leadership. He would be a superb upgrade on Dan Burn. But it takes something for Arsenal to sell him to a direct rival, because as much as this is Newcastle's best opportunity to get into the top 4 and really, rattle the likes of Liverpool and Chelsea and Man United, the same goes for Arsenal. This was probably the best chance they had to win the Premier League. And now they know that next season they're going to be in the battle for the top 4, but against Newcastle and against maybe Villa and against other teams that aren't there this season, are they really going to go and strengthen a rival?
Probably not. We saw it earlier this season, the likes of Chelsea and other teams around them not wanting to help Newcastle. And I think we'll see a lot of that this summer. Everybody I've spoken to, every Arsenal fan I've spoken to about Kieran Tierney always says the same thing. Would be fantastic for you. It would be a very good signing for 25 million, but his injury record is concerning. I think that's the one negative sort of pulling it down.
The mighty win says Gunners fan pods are slating Teeny. Well, from what I've heard up here, Newcastle are big fans of him. So I suppose everyone's got their opinion, but I'm sure Newcastle have done their homework on him. David says, I'd rather we spend 40 million on a central midfielder over Gordon. Could have revisited Gordon in the summer. Graham says, would love, at least very under the radar. I think he will be superstar. Eze as well is another one from Palace who I think could definitely do a job. Loads of people talking about who they could bring in the summer. It's going to be very exciting to see who indeed they do come in. I'm just going to go back to one of the comments that the Mighty Win made. I tell you what, on that name, the Mighty Win, Mighty Win Davies, he could have done a job in this. Well, I suppose you'd have to put the ball in the box, which Newcastle can't seem to do, and that leads us on actually because. Well, let me first of all just on this con from the Mighty Win. I don't agree with that. I do not agree that if you sign players from relegated sides that they come in and your level drops and you will end up dropping. Not at all. Not at all.
Liverpool, this just for an example, won the league having signed Andy Robertson from Championship Club, Ginny Wijnaldum from a certain Championship club. I can't remember who that was, and Sadio Mane from Southampton. So it can be done. Don't be put off by teams getting relegated. Players, you can actually get some bargains, as David Stratton says here. Nick Pope got relegated.
He did.
Exactly.
He did. So there are players to be bought from relegated sides and from the Championship as well. I totally forgot what we were going to talk about there. Oh yes, now I remember. I've tried to erase it from my mind. Now it's a running joke with the chap I sit next to at the games that every time we get a corner or a free kick, I'll just say it's not going to beat the first man. And very, very rarely it beats the first man. And the comments on social media this weekend about Newcastle's inability to make the most of set pieces, it's been raging, hasn't it? Like people are fuming rightly because Newcastle just don't make the most of set pieces. And very rarely the corners, they just don't beat the first man. And when you've got the likes of Botman, the likes of Dan Burn, the likes of Cher, who are good with a head, are tall, big, you've got to be making the most of getting those balls into the box. And recently they just have not been doing that.
Yeah, Trippier, for all his strengths, and we know he's very, very good from dead ball players. He's very good at, taking free kicks when he's in a shooting position. But for whatever reason, what's really interesting is that Newcastle start the season in blistering form from corners. They were trying all these new routines. It was working. Eddie Howe, was getting lauded for it in the press conference. He was saying, no, it's Tyndall and Weatherstone and Purchase and Graham Jones. It's them that are doing the work on the training ground. And for whatever reason, it's just dried up.
Yeah. So what's the solution?
Well, I wrote a piece about this yesterday. And I think Newcastle in the summer would do really, really well to go out and sign a proper set piece specialists. A lot of top clubs are getting them now. Tottenham's, for example, under Conte, Giovanni Vio, he had something ridiculous like 4,000 corner routines to go from in his arsenal. Manchester City, Pep went out and signed the best of the best. Last season, they scored from 24 set pieces, conceded from 1. Very, very good. A Premier League record, I believe. And even Liverpool in recent years have gone out and signed a throwing coach, which seemed ridiculous at the time, but is clearly well renowned. So I think Newcastle in the summer, they've done very well at bringing in boardroom staff and coaches and analysts and what they're not. But I think a set piece specialist would be suited for them.
James Ward-Prowse.
Exactly.
I would fine players, If they don't beat the first man with the corner, I'd be fining them. It's a disgrace. It really is. You're fresh footballers. You've got to be beating the first man. Absolute joke. As Brian says, starting joke with my mate that we never score from corners. I don't actually sit next to Brian, but he clearly has the same sense of humour that I do. We've got Mighty Win coming back on our comments about relegated players. Meanwhile, Pep signed Mahrez, Grealish and Stone. But what I would say to that is, Mahrez cost about £2 from France, didn't he, from a first division side? So, these players have all, and Grealish, Villa would just survive relegation, I think, when he moved to City. So it's not like, these players were flying high. And Aaron has closed his booklet there, but I think he may have forgotten that I have some trivia from the weekly trivia. Did you forget the weekly trivia?
I did forget.
So Callum Wilson, ladies and gents, 17 Premier League goals this season. The first time that's been done. since Alan Shearer, 2003, 2004. So I've gone back. I haven't gone back as far as that, but I've gone back to the 2010-11 season.
Okay.
Can you name the top scorers from each of those seasons, not including the season Newcastle were down in the Championship, and can you put them in order? So I will help you out. Callum Wilson tops the list. He tops the list, 17 goals. So what I will do is I will then give you the season to help you out because I'm feeling kind. So next, 2011, 2012.
Cisse?
No.
Bar?
Demba Ba. Now, do you know how many goals he got?
14.
Got 16 goals. So that leads us on to next in the list, 2013, 2014. But what I'll do is to make it easy, I'll give you the number of goals to score and you can just tell me the player.
Okay.
Right. So next in the list with 14 goals, 2013, 2014.
Ooh, Remy?
Like Remy, ladies and gents. Right. Number 4 on the list, 2012, 2013 with 13 goals.
Cisse?
Nope.
No, I don't know this one.
Demba Ba.
Bar again.
Which, just interesting, because we were speaking again off camera, obviously the whole Isak Wilson experiment, that's some are calling it. We saw that under Pardew, didn't we? Where it was the boy forced out on the left, or was it? Yeah, it just didn't work. And sometimes you just maybe got to just concede. You can't get both players into a side.
Yeah, it's maybe looking like that at the minute with those two.
So next, you have 3 options here.
Okay.
So 3 players on 12 goals.
Okay.
Which we'll go with 2010, 2011. I'll give you the easy one.
The easy one.
I think
Cast my mind
2010,
back
2011.
A long time there.
12 goals. I'll give you the years. You've got 2020, 21, and 2018, 2019.
I think the 18-19 one might be Ginny Wijnaldum.
No.
Oh.
Goodness me. That is a horrendous guess.
No, he generally hit a good 10 or 11.
No, he did.
In
He
season.
did.
Yeah.
Yes, he did. But not that season.
Oh, God, it was a season where they went down, didn't they? Oh, God, yeah, it was a couple of seasons after.
Right. Anyway.
10-11, I can't get my mind back that far.
Kevin Nolan, 12 goals, and then you have another 2 on 12. 18-19. Perez, and then 2021.
Wilson.
There we go. Right, 6th. You've got 2 players who are number 6 on the list. 14-15 and 15-16. 11 goals.
Ginny Wijnaldum.
Yeah. And his one and only season to Newcastle before he moved to Liverpool. I mean, the worst thing is you actually mentioned just before when he left.
Yeah, I know. And what was the other season?
14-15.
With 11 goals.
Yeah.
14-15 would have been...
John's mentioned Andy Carroll. I'm not sure if he's taking the mick out of you there or not, to be fair.
14-15... No, I'm not sure on that one.
Pabis Cisse.
Cisse again. Yeah.
And then we go to number 7 on the list, 2 players with 8 goals, 1 in 17-18 and 1 in 21-22. So one last season.
Last season was Wilson again,
and then 17-18.
Mitrovic.
Perez, 8 goals. And then finally, which is probably the hardest one to get actually, 2019-2020 with 6 goals. I'm not sure many people will get this because I certainly didn't get it.
Shelby.
Get out.
Yeah, Shelby.
Okay, maybe not as difficult as I thought. Yeah, John Joe Shelby.
Redeemed for Andy Carroll?
I don't know. We'll leave that up to the people in the comments. I'm not really sure you're going to ever redeem that Andy Carroll guess there. But yes, this has been the Everything is Black and White podcast. Thank you very much for tuning in. If you don't already follow us on your podcast provider, do please hit that subscribe button and leave us a rating and review if you get the chance. Head over to chroniclelive.co.uk for all the latest Newcastle United news. And just a reminder that tickets to our live event are still on sale, taking place on Thursday, the 25th of May, with Aaron, Kieran, Kelly, Lee Ryder, Simon Bird, Matthew Raisbeck, and Norberto Salonen. Just a handful of tickets left. So please do go over and get those. Tickets cost £5, including fees, set to be a great night. For me and Aaron, we'll see you very soon. And then, like I say, head over to chroniclelive.co.uk.